you've got to figure out where you want the storage file to be. Later on, we work with databases, in which case it will be more based on a network, not in a single location. But when you work with files, it's normally like your .dat files, your .txt files, those kind of things, which can be they will normally be stored within the program, and that's just to store a little bit of configuration settings that's specific to that individual account. Because often when you create programs, they'll be used for multiple different users, but text files are used to store, or .dat files, whatever, are used to store that specific locations or items configurations. So I'm going to create a new text file here, and I'm going to call it, give me a scenario. Okay, so this one's going to be people's dietary habits, and we're going to have data on that, which is rather random, but yeah, okay. So I'm going to rename it. I'm going to call it people. I would suggest sticking to a similar naming convention. Usually you like to change the extension from .txt to something else that people would not actually just be able to directly open it. At some point you can also use encryption so that people can't actually just read it by changing the extension. I'm going to call mine .did just because I can, and I'm going to add fields into there. Now if we're adding data, you always got to think about how your storage is going to work, because every single person is going to have more than one bit of information. So a person is going to have a first name, right? What other information would a person have? A last name. But now, how would you separate that? In other words, how would I tell the computer that this is separated from that? Okay, so the idea there was a space, but then the problem is with funder merver. Alright, so we've got the first name and last name. You can't separate it with the space because the funder has spaces in it. So what we usually do is you can use a tab, and remember the tab is a character. So you can use a tab character to separate it. And also what's common practice is actually use a hash to separate it. So you can separate, and this separator between one field, so we call this a field. So the first name is a field where you can enter multiple first names in there, and last name is another field. Now, this here is what we call a delimiter. And in this case, if I go tab, the tab is the delimiter. If I put a hash, the hash is the delimiter. So you can use whatever you want. There are actually reserved characters, like for example, you can't use a star as a delimiter, because a star is considered a wild key, and it causes hassles if you use that. So we're going to have first name, last name, hash, dietary issue, or favorite food, let's just say. This is very random, but yeah. Okay, favorite food. So we're going to have a simply set up like that. That's it. Okay, and I'm also going to put there number of days exercise. Yeah, you guys get what I mean. I'm not going to type it all. Number exercise per week. Now, how would I enter the first record? I'll just put there. Let's put Liam. I'm just going to pause this and enter some data. So we've created a file and we have a delimiter between it. Now this is inside this project. Now I want to close this, but actually I want to leave it open so we can just keep it in mind that this is what our data is. And now we're going to go back to our screen here. Now a very important concept to work with. I've created a class called Dewey, and this is where my user interface is going to be. Now a big part of your matric project marks goes towards the fact that you separate your user interface from your working class. Now what we're going to do here is I'm going to create, actually I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to quickly create a Java frame rather. I'm going to pause the video while doing that. The logic of this, you want to separate your actual reading from your text file or your any form of manipulation of data or anything. You want to separate it out completely, because you want to be able to switch interfaces. If you want to now code it for an Android phone, or if you want to now code it for a web-based interface, you want to be able to use the same code that you've already got and just manipulate the interfaces, rather than having to recode it all again. So what you do is you create a new Java class, and in this case I want to call it my storage manager. And this class only goal is to manage my storage items. So we're going to create a method, and we're going to call this public string get people, and its job is just to return all the people and all its information. So defaultly, when I create a typed method, so in this case it's a string typed method, I am going to have to also create a blank version. I'm just going to call it people of the same data type, and then I just return that blank version. The reason why I do this is, one, because it will get you marks, because your method that returns a data type actually does physically return the data type, and two, because now it's actually it makes your life easier. You just have to populate people with the field that's in there. So, step one, we need to connect to this file. Now, to connect to this file, you literally just go File, make use of your Control spacebar, and you'll see there java.io. So java.io, so you guys remember I've created this project on the shared drive, so you can create, copy and paste the text file from there if you want, because it needs to exist. So I'm going to create a file called f, and I'm going to say f is equal to new file. Now, there's a whole bunch of different options here. We're not going to go into details of all of them. The only one that we're going to use is the string, and this is literally the path where this file is. Now, because we put the file within the project folder, we don't need to do much else. All we need to do is go, okay, it's called people, and I called mine people.did. And then this will actually open up a connection to this file. So the connection to the storage has been opened. Now what we need to do, so literally all this is done is it tells the program that this physically exists, and it gives it a reference to this file. So it's able to refer to it within the code. That's all that's done. Now what we actually need to do is we need to actually get the program to open it and put a cursor into it. So in other words, so to be able to read information from it. I'm going to delete that first line, otherwise it's going to throw us off a bit. Or do you want me to leave it in so we can get that? Let me just leave it in. Keep track of it. It's not going to affect it too much. Normally you wouldn't have the headers in your text file. Now, to actually run through it, you use what's called a scanner. Now, a scanner allows you to be able to move through each individual part of the file. So now if I go scanner, now you'll see it'll automatically import scanner. It's the same thing with file. It'll automatically import a file because I use my control spacebar. So using your control spacebar is important because it will automatically import. Otherwise, you have to just make sure you import the file or the information you use. Some people prefer to import everything before they go ahead and code. If you want to do that, go ahead. I'm going to call this SCF, in other words, scan a file. And I'm going to go is equal to new scanner. And you'll see the options of items to use here. Again, there's a whole bunch of different ones you can use. You can use input streams, blah, 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 blah. We are just going to deal directly with reading from the file. Now, you'll notice it gives me a red underline. Now, to understand red underlines, you have to understand a try catch. Did we do that last term? Let me just pause while I get to my face. Explain an exception handler. An exception is thrown when there is an unexpected issue. In other words, for example, in this case, it's dealing with reading from a text file. This is external from the program, so it cannot be managed directly inside the program. So it could have issues. And a exception handler, or in this case, the method what's called throw, it throws an error. And in the case of throwing, it needs to be handled. In other words, at some point, we need to say, if this error occurs, what are we going to do? Now, we have a choice right now. If I click on this little light bulb on the left-hand side, it gives me options on how to handle it. And the options I have is, one, I can actually surround it with a try catch, which means I'm going to actually literally deal with it right now. So I'm going to deal with the problem, or I can just throw it. And I'm actually going to throw it. Now, the reason why I throw it, because I want to separate my user interface completely from my working. So if I want to actually tell the user, hey, by the way, this text file is missing, so I'm unable to run. But I don't want to tell the user this from my working class because I don't know what interface I'm using. I could be using a web-based interface, and then in which case I can't then use a JOption pane. I might be using a whatever interface, so I can't use that. So I continue throwing it, so I don't deal with it now, and that gets rid of the error. It just means that I'm going to throw this error further on, and somewhere else I have to handle it. Does this make sense? Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go while scf.hasNext. And what this is, it's a Boolean statement that basically says loop while there is more in the text file. So all I'm doing there is I'm saying to it, if there exists more, so my scanner literally places a cursor in my text file. My .hasNext says, is there anything right of this cursor? Now, right now, we've got a never-ending loop because if my cursor just stays there, it's never going to move, is it? So it's not going to have anything. So what we're going to do to start off with, I'm going to go string record. Now, does anybody know what the term record means? No. Okay. A record means like Liam